Okay, hello guys, and welcome back to Chaotic Crime. So, welcome back to season 2, should I actually say, because I'm doing a revamp this season. I hit a creative block, like writer's block. I hit like a creative block. So, it's really hard for me to create, research, and give you guys all of the facts and the passion I want in these cases because obviously you don't like true crime is creative enough in itself, realistically. Um, Sorry, I just had like a brain blank as to where I was going with that. But yeah, true. My God, it's already starting, and I've only been on not even 30 seconds. So I was just having trouble creating, and I want to pour as much love and energy and passion into this, and I don't want it to ever be a strenuous task because then I feel like it's taking away on what I'm really trying to do here, and that is use my voice to raise awareness to true crime cases, and maybe my voice soothes somebody and they can get through a case if they're hearing it through my voice. Maybe I'm being overdramatic, maybe everybody hates me, but regardless of the fact, this is my creative outlet, this is what I like to do. So that had stumped, life got in the way. Anyway, I'm back now. So that's my little rant. And just actually on that rant, before we get into this case, my partner thinks I don't have a life because I've been reading a lot of books lately. And I read a lot of crime, quite a bit of true crime. But when I read fiction, I read a lot of psychological thrillers. And he literally said to me the other day when we were in the bookshop looking for a book, and he's like, what about this one? What about this one? And I'd read like, I reckon 90% of the books he picked up. He's like, do you actually have a life? And I sat there and I was like, yeah, no, not really. But I read these books and I think, oh my God, this shit is off tap. And then I read true crime cases and then I think, wait, no, reality's off tap. These books are actually lighthearted. So maybe that's why I've been having a little bit of a break. I feel like I'm just making excuses now. But anyway, doing a revamp this season. So if you hated us last season, try us again because I'm going to try and put a new spin on the way I share these stories and the way I sort of shed light on these cases. So starting with, I'm going to try to get some visuals up, like full videos. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, season 2, we're going to basically do kind of themes, I guess you could say. So for the month of June, I'm going to do unsolved cases. I'm going to do a combination of cases that have either been like heavily broadcasted and sorry, let me reword that actually. So I'm going to do a mix of cases that I guess have been all over the headlines and broadcasted on the news, and you may or may not have heard about them. And then I'm also going to do a mix of cases that maybe you haven't heard about or maybe didn't get the media attention that it deserved at the time. Because as we know, certain things, I don't mean to laugh because it's not funny, but like certain things really don't get the attention they deserve based around what the hell is going on in the world at that point. So, yeah, whether you've got a voice big or small, I think you should use it. So I'm interested to see how much of this episode I can actually get through in one sitting today because my mic is nearly dead. And yeah, as you can see, I've probably been out of the game. So mics are dead, setups all over the shop. We just don't know what's going on. So yeah, all right. With all of that and my absolute rant, let's get into that. Let's get into today's case. I've obviously got my coffee and I've already gardened because I feel like if you're sharing these stories like I am, you definitely need to garden medically, before you sit down and, yeah, share this dark shit. All right, so today's episode is covering the disappearance of Maura Murray. So this is set back in 2004. And I like when I was sort of not covering, but like looking into this case, I was sort of like thinking, I was like, 2004 is probably Facebook's peak, right? So Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student who vanished without a trace in 2004. This case has truly baffled investigators and armchair detectives alike for years, spawning numerous theories and endless speculation. So, before we actually dive into the mysteries surrounding this disappearance, let's take a closer look at Maura's background and the events that actually led up to that fateful night of her disappearance. So, Maura was born on May 4th, 1982, in Hanson, Massachusetts. Massachusetts, it's such a strange word. I always like struggle with these American states, I guess. Massachusetts is a state, isn't it? I was never good at that, so don't quote me on that. And she was the fourth of 5 children in the Murray family. She was known to be athletic, particularly in track, and she was also known for her academic achievements. And after completing high school, she received an appointment to the United States Military Academy at the West Point as a testament to her dedication and her discipline. So after a year at West Point, Maura transferred to the University of Massachusetts, and she had the full intention of pursuing a degree in nursing. This move was significant, as it marked a transition from the military environment to a traditional college setting. So friends and family noted that Maura seemed to be adjusting well, and she maintained her academic excellence, and she was forming close relationships with her classmates. So Maura actually got a job within campus security. And while she was working her campus security job, Maura had a breakdown. So her supervisor, Karen, found her in a distressed state. It is believed that Maura had a phone conversation with her older sister, Kathleen, who was dealing with some personal issues which had deeply affected Maura. So essentially, now I want to kind of get into the lead up to the events. So what I just mentioned happened on Thursday, the 5th of February, 2004. By Saturday, February 7th, 2004, Maura's father, Fred Murray, visited her to assist in car shopping. Now, the car shopping would have been in Amherst. Amherst? Why does that sound so weird to say? Sorry. Like I said, some words, they just, like, I think it's just the way I speak. So they were doing this essentially because Maura's vehicle was aging. So this is on February 7th. And that evening, Maura borrowed her father's new Toyota Corolla to attend a dorm party. So in the early hours of Sunday, which is February 8th, she had an accident. So she crashed the car into a guardrail. And I believe that was confirmed, that it was actually, it actually crashed into a guardrail. So the damage was actually significant, but there were no injuries. So the damage was only significant to the new Toyota Corolla, but not to Maura herself. The incident added to Maura's stress as she felt she had then disappointed her father. So then we're going to Monday, February 9th, 2004. So this is when Maura's actions start to get a little bit puzzling. So Maura emailed her professor and her work supervisor stating that there had been a death in her family and that she would be absent for roughly a week. However, there was no such death that actually occurred within the family. She then packed her belongings, including her textbooks and personal items, and left the campus. Maura then withdrew $280 from an ATM, purchased alcohol, and set off in her black 1996 sedan. And it's a Saturn sedan. And it was supposedly heading north. So that was on Monday, February 9th. So now we're going to get into the actual disappearance. So I'm just trying to essentially right now lay out the timeline for you guys so you sort of get an idea of what was happening leading up and whether Maura's actions were at all bizarre or I guess peculiar. Because when I was researching this case, the investigators really did lay out a timeline. So I believe that some of these things that, like, obviously Maura was distressed. But I look at it and think, is there more to it? Like, why was she so distressed? Why was she running? But yeah, these are just theories that I have. Obviously, we'll keep going and then you guys will gauge your own theories, I'm sure. So the disappearance itself. So the disappearance actually happened on February 9th. So that Monday that she was seen heading north, this was the day that was stated the last time that Maura was seen. She hasn't been seen since. Okay, so the disappearance itself. So all of these timelines and times that I'm about to say are on date of Monday, February 9th, 2004. So at 7:27 p.m., Maura's car was found crashed on Route 112 near Woodsville, New Hampshire. And a local resident named Faith Westman reported the incident to the police, noting that the car was facing westbound on the eastbound side of the road. 7:30 p.m., a passing motorist, Butch Atwood, a school bus driver, stopped and spoke to Maura. He offered assistance, but she declined, stating that she had already called for roadside help, which was later found to be untrue. Atwood noted that Maura did not appear injured, but seemed to be cold in her mannerisms. Now, just sort of said seemed cold, but I'm like, is that like, and I'm just going to say cold in her mannerisms because she declined help, but I don't know if he like meant seemed cold as in she was physically cold. So you guys can take what you will of that one. 7:46 p.m. when law enforcement arrived at the scene, Maura was nowhere to be found. So 7:27, it was reported. The car crashed, it was reported. 7:46, she was nowhere to be seen. Her car was locked, and inside the officers discovered boxed wine behind the driver's seat, an empty beer bottle, Maura's belongings, her AAA card, and that was all that was left behind. So the night she vanished, February 9th, 2004. Here's what we know. At 1 p.m., Maura emails her professor saying that there's a family emergency, but there wasn't, which is what we now know. 3:40 p.m., she withdraws $280 from the ATM. At 4:30 p.m., she Googles directions to Burlington, Vermont. By 7:27 p.m., she crashes her car at Haverhill, New Hampshire. By the way, guys, Haverhill is the exact location, just so you guys know, because obviously we said previously that it was near Woodsville, but that was the exact location. Then a witness sees her. So the woman named Faith Westman calls 911 saying there's been a car crash in the snowbank. Atwood stops for help, in which he is declined. He asks, "Are you okay?" She says, "I've already contacted AA," but she never actually called AA. So then by 7:46 p.m., Officer Cecily Smith arrives. She finds that her car is there. Her phone is gone. Maura's vanished. There's no footprints in the snow. And cadaver dogs lost her scent in the middle of the road upon further investigation and searches. So where the fuck did she go? I'm sorry that I swear, but that's just me, because I just don't know how else to emphasize on like how, and these cases where people literally just vanish into thin air is so bizarre to me, and I can't even express how painful that would be for the family. So now that we've covered the events leading up to Maura's disappearance, let's explore some of the various theories that have emerged over the years. Because this is 2004, so we're talking over 20 years, like 21 years since Maura's disappeared, and we still have no answers. So she wandered into the woods and died is one of the main theories that I think people have. Which to me, I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. There just seems like more to it. So this is one of the first initial theories that came up, that possibly she was disorientated from the accident, under the influence, and then wandered into surrounding woods and scumbled to the elements. But I mean, in search efforts, and I mean extensive search efforts that were conducted in the area surrounding that crash site, it was search and rescue teams along with tracking dogs. They scoured the woods and they found no scent, no trace, no nothing. So the tracking dogs reportedly lost her scent approximately 100 yards east of the crash site, suggesting that she may have entered a vehicle at that given point. The environmental factors around this theory as well. The night of the disappearance, it was cold, with temperatures dropping below freezing. If Maura had both ventured into the woods without the proper attire, hypothermia could have set in quite quickly. However, the lack of any physical evidence, such as clothing or remains, casts a lot of doubt on this theory. And it is kind of perplexing, that despite these search efforts, no evidence was found to support this theory. So the idea that she just scumbled to the elements seems less likely given the lack of physical evidence. Theory 2, and this is one of the darker theories, and I guess if you listen to a lot of true crime or you're into true crime, this could possibly be where your mind's going straight away, was that she was actually picked up by a killer. Likely, maybe not, but unlikely, not completely. So just bear with me. So this sort of suggests that she accepted a ride from a passing motorist with ill intentions, leading her to her abduction and then possible murder. Witnesses reported seeing a suspicious vehicle in the area around the time of Maura's disappearance. However, these reports were inconsistent and no vehicle matching the descriptions was ever linked to her case. So, not sure. There are some local suspects though. So over the years, several individuals in the area with criminal background had been scrutinized. In one incident, a local man's brother claimed that his sibling had acted strangely after Maura's disappearance and even provided a rusty knife, suggesting it had been used in the crime. However, investigations into these leads yielded no concrete evidence. So I think the possibility of foul play can't really be dismissed completely, especially given the abrupt loss of her scent near the road, no footprints in the snow. I know that there's no solid evidence or credible witnesses, but this theory it remains strong, not just with me, but across a lot of people. So theory 3 is another one that plays on my mind quite a lot. And that's the boyfriend cover-up theory. So some have speculated that Maura's boyfriend, Bill, was involved in her disappearance either directly or indirectly. So in the years following Maura's disappearance, Bill faced allegations of misconduct in sort of unrelated cases to Maura's. So let me just specify on that. But some have pointed to these allegations as a sign of a potential pattern in behaviour. However, it is critical to note that these incidents occurred years after Maura's disappearance, and they do not directly implicate him in the case itself. This is just speculation from locals, and I think if you guys know what living in a small town or a town that maybe you grew up in your whole life, even if it's not small, you know of everybody. So gather some of the locals maybe have a bit of an idea on who Bill really is, whereas to us it's just a name and a headline. So at the time of Maura's disappearance, Bill was stationed at Fort Still, Oklahoma, making it unlikely that he was physically present, but the phone records indicate he did attempt to contact Maura multiple times after her disappearance, which also then suggests that he was unaware of her whereabouts. But if you guys have heard a lot of cases, you would know that that's play-by-play with some people in terms of a cover-up or trying to cover your tracks. But I also feel like if he was in Oklahoma at the time and it was proven that he was, it would be more likely that if Bill was involved, it was at him directing somebody, if that makes any sense. So while it's natural to scrutinize those close to the missing person, the evidence does not support Bill's involvement in Maura's disappearance at this point. So theory 4 is a police cover-up, and I feel like in a lot of cases, police cover-up comes into play. In a few, it seems more likely, in some less likely. I'll let you guys decide. So some really do believe that local law enforcement mishandled the investigation or were involved in a cover-up. So the initial response. Critics argue that the initial response to Maura's disappearance was lackluster, treating it as a standard missing persons case rather than a potential crime scene, and some have pointed the inconsistencies in police reports, including discrepancies in timelines, statements given by reporting officers. So playing it back to a bit back in the episode where we mentioned the officer that arrived at the scene, so Officer Cecily Smith, and her cruiser, which is the car that she arrived in. So a controversial theory emerged suggesting that the vehicle seen at the scene of Maura's crash was not Officer Cecily Smith's standard cruiser, but it was an unmarked police vehicle. So this claim then led to the speculation that Maura may have been picked up by someone posing as law enforcement, or that a member of law enforcement was directly involved in her disappearance. And the lack of forensic evidence. So critics really argue, critics pinpoint me, that the investigation actually lacked any thoroughness, particularly in terms of the forensic analysis of Maura's vehicle, the forensic analysis of the crime scene, like appreciate search and rescue efforts. But some believe that critical evidence may have been overlooked or just intentionally ignored. The police cover-up theory is one of the more sensationalized ideas surrounding this case. So while there are errors in the investigation, and in every investigation there seems to be these occur, there is no direct evidence pointing to an intentional cover-up by law enforcement. Nor is there really any background that Maura put herself in a position where this could have been the case, but I definitely feel like the police did not do Maura or her family any justice in this case. So theory 5, and this is probably one of the more debated theories, but I'm sure it's played on some of your mind as like some of your guys, I don't really like the way that sounds, some of your minds as you've listened to this, is that Maura actually left to start a new life. So let's just break that down. So planning and preparation. So supporters of this theory cite that Maura's actions leading up to her disappearance, such as withdrawing cash, searching for lodging in New Hampshire, emailing professors about a non-existent family emergency, are all acting as signs of a premeditated departure. But that leads me back to, where is she now? Why has she not made contact with anybody in 21 years? Regardless, we're going to keep breaking this one down. So the lack of confirmed sightings, that's a big part of this, is despite numerous supposed sightings over the years, and there has been a lot, that's why I haven't really gone into it too much, is because there is so much evidence in this case that it doesn't actually seem to be like back up, whether it's a hoax, whether it's somebody thinking that they're helping, whether it's somebody that really does think that they saw her. There's just a lot of evidence, and I wouldn't even call it evidence, I guess, leads that have come up that haven't really led to anything. So there's been a lot of supposed sightings over the years, none of which have actually been confirmed. So this then raises the question about whether Maura could have successfully established a new identity, or whether something did actually happen. So Maura's family strongly rejects this theory, stating that she had no known reason to run away permanently and not make contact with anybody. They argue that if she had willingly disappeared, she would have contacted somebody by now, which I'm going to throw my hand up and say I really do believe that too. So the idea of Maura starting a new life is intriguing, but it's kind of difficult to prove. So while some aspects of her behavior suggest maybe a bit of premeditation, maybe she wasn't very happy, there's no concrete evidence that actually indicates that she wanted to vanish indefinitely. And in my mind, if she actually wanted to vanish, she maybe wanted to vanish for a little bit. But how many of us think, oh, yeah, I just want to pack up and start again? I just don't think you would not make contact with anybody unless there's something more sinister in her personal life that we haven't found out yet. So after 2 decades, Maura Murray's disappearance remains an enduring mystery. The case continues to generate interest, with online sleuths and investigation journalists digging for new leads. However, many questions really do remain unanswered. Why did Maura leave UMass so abruptly? What was her intended destination? And did she actually plan to disappear, or was she met with foul play? And why was her scent lost in the middle of the road? So this case is as frustrating as it is fascinating. There are too many inconsistencies, too many theories, and not enough concrete evidence. For me, I feel like something may have happened at UMass that we're not aware of. During this series that we're going to do, I'm going to really sort of emphasize on some of these college disappearances and the fact that I think something sinister might be going on deep down. And maybe this is just a weird feeling that I have, but I feel like Maura saw something or something happened to her that is explaining her weird behavior leading up to and making her scared. So that's just my idea on it. I don't know what that was, whether someone done something ill-intended to her and then felt like they needed to get rid of her, whether she saw something she shouldn't have, whether it was even more than that, I don't know. That's just where my mind goes. So whether Maura was abducted or she suffered an accident or she chose to leave her life behind, one thing remains clear. Her family deserves closure. And they deserve closure now after nearly 21 years. So if you guys have any information on this, or you've seen Maura, or you think you know something about this case, please contact the links below. It's really important that we use our voice, big or small, whether we think it's a waste of time or not. It could help lead to answers. So if you even have any thoughts or theories on Maura's case, or you want me to dive more into my theory on Maura's case, let me know. I'd love to hear what you guys think. So that concludes today's episode. And I want to end it off with my final note that I always say at the end of every episode is, as always, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you next time on Chaotic Crime.